Okay. The government. There was much trumpeting of the auction recently for the contracts for offshore renewable wind. I don't really know why there is any celebration whatsoever of the fact, because what is in fact is an auction to privatise our wind resources, which I think is shameful and is a hostage to fortune. We know in many instances the private consortiums, companies that are involved can just decide to pull out. They have us over a barrel when you give them these resources, because our ability to deliver on our renewable energy targets and therefore to deliver on our climate targets are in effect in the hands of investors, private companies, often financed by hedge funds. So that's who we're handing over our precious renewable energy resources to in an auction, where I don't know if there was a little bit of sort of clever game playing going on, in that we have these dire warnings that the price is going to be shockingly high. Then it doesn't end up quite as high as that, but it's still very considerably above the EU average and above what, for example, was achieved in Scotland. So it makes it sound like it's good, but in fact it's very, very costly. But in any event, all the benefits are going to private companies who then have us over a barrel. So in the first instance, I am utterly opposed to the privatisation of our wind resources. I think it is absolutely wrong, and I think it makes us very, very vulnerable to whatever those private companies and consortiums and their investors and so on want to do at some point in the future. What we need is the state driving this, and that the people, and when I say the state, I mean insofar as the state is supposed to represent the interests of the people, that the benefits would derive to us rather than big private companies. So that's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, I think the government were put under enormous pressure to bring in a plan-led approach. Because you hadn't designated the marine protected areas, you'd let the developers decide the sites, and under enormous pressure, you then say, well, okay, we're going to bring in a plan-led approach from now on, but not for the relevant projects. And they're getting in under the wire, and they're going to go ahead. Now, I believe that is absolutely wrong, because what the scale of what those relevant projects are, which are developer decided, not plan-based, not based on what protecting the marine environment, protecting biodiversity is about, but on what they wanted. And the pressure they have put on you, and all they're interested in, let's remember, is the bottom line for themselves. And I do not think that is acceptable. Because certainly when you look at the area of sandbanks, for example, and we're talking about massive turbines at very, very close proximity and on sandbanks, which the EU have said need to be protected. And I know from talking to the fishermen, they say they are effectively going to be destroyed by this. That the sandbanks, the Kish and the Codling Bank are the spawning grounds for shellfish and fish. They are also a natural reef protecting the east coast, and that this is going to absolutely destroy them, and that runs counter to the report produced by the EU Parliament in 2021, for example, and there are probably a whole number of directives which stated that fishermen were supposed to be involved in the decision-making process. Decisions were not supposed to be made that would negatively impact on them, but what's actually happening is, even now at the surveying stage and so on, it's death by 1,000 cuts. That's what they're saying. They're being rowed completely roughshod over. So this is not sustainable development and planning. It is still the developers dictating a massive, massive development that could be very destructive of biodiversity. And if you destroy biodiversity, any gains you claim you're making on climate change will actually be cutting off your nose to spite your face, because biodiversity, the biodiversity emergency is absolutely critical, and the health of our marine is critical also to dealing with climate change.
Thank you, Deputy. Now